Hi, everybody. I'm Tasha Simms.
And I'm Mark Curran.
And this is Conscious Living Radio. We're obviously on Facebook Live right now. And then the audio will be on Co-op Radio, 100.5 FM in Vancouver. Conscious Living is the name of the show. I'm excited about today's guest. This is the first time I have ever found anybody on social media and gone, hey, like just reached out, hey, do you want to do a radio show? All right, so let me tell you about Damien Bohler. He's been facilitating, teaching groups in relational practices for 10 years, loves to create safe space and transformational group containers to impart knowledge in a way that's easy to grasp. He's head facilitator of Evolutionary Relating, teaches a course called The Fundamentals of Authentic Relating, and he's committed to his desire to contribute to human evolution. So our focus today is these aspects of the energy of intimacy, just what the fundamentals of authentic relating mean. And my hope is that you'll get some practical tools so you can get more proficient at it, increase your ability to listen, express, and attune to other humans. Welcome to the show, Damien.
Thanks for having me.
Like I say, it was so funny. Some clip, for some reason, you came across my thread, and then I looked and went, who do we know in common? And it was three people, two right now I'm remembering, which was Sechan Raja, who we've had on the show tons of times and we know super well in the community. And then Lorianne Lothian was another person. And I just went, okay, so there's some link. But I got to say, I loved your energy. You were speaking with a woman about masculine, feminine, and something I hope we'll touch on in a little bit around being the avoidant or the anxious person in a dynamic of reactivity between two people. But what I particularly was drawn to was the fact that you challenged her and it wasn't aggressive. It was like my whole being softened and I went, that's so cool, because we have this weird distortion. This is not how I was going to start the show, but I want to tell you why you're here, like what made me say, just follow your impulse. And it was that kind of, you've got a gentle quality about you. And yet it was extremely masculine in the sense that it was like, I'm not actually going to accept that bullshit, excuse me, but let me ask you about that. Let me challenge it. And it was done in such a kind, loving way that that she could hear it. And then I went, I got to find out more about you. So that led me to your fundamentals of authentic relating. And here we are getting to know each other for the first time. Tell us about what brought you into this field. You're from Australia. What brought you into being drawn to this whole idea of interpersonal relating?
There's like a standard answer I could probably give around the story of how I found this work. But like the moment you asked that question, I just found myself reflecting on myself and my life and who I am. And, I've been quite an introvert, a little bit shy, awkward child growing up, difficulty with making friends, kind of like bullied a lot right through school, but always had a very curious mind, very open mind, seeing quite a lot, like used to bury my head in books constantly, and I have my parents are Buddhist, so I was kind of brought up in a household that meditated and had personal reflection as part of, our narrative. And I think all of that combined with this awkwardness and this inability to find a way to fit in with other people. And, I ended up in high school. My social group was basically the misfits. We were all the people who didn't fit in anywhere else, and we ended up together. And so I think those kind of seeds had in me like a deep yearning or a longing for how do I actually be connected to other humans? And that's always been something I think that's been important to me. And then also, I had difficulties in my relating with women. I was quite a late starter, and the first time I had a girlfriend. Some uncomfortable experiences in primary school and high school with my relating with women and girls at that age. So I think all of this hurt a lot, but it also had in me like a hunger to find out something different. And I got specifically into the work of authentic relating at the end of a relationship that was maybe like a 4 or 5 year relationship. It's probably like around 5 years into a relationship. It was failing. It was ending. We were in conflict a lot. I wasn't feeling met. She wasn't feeling met. And I met someone who was teaching this work specifically for men to get better at relating to women. And I just dived in and I jumped into the work. I absorbed everything they'd put out about it. And this was 11, 12 years ago. And I just started somehow, like, I was living in Thailand at the time, and I learned to speak Thai, and I learned to speak by immersing myself in the language. I just used to have conversations in Thai with everyone all the time. I didn't study books or anything like that. I just immersed myself. And it was like the same with this work. I just began to use the tools that were taught, and they weren't taught as explicitly as I'd been structuring my course, but they were embedded in the programs I was teaching. And it was like I took them and I just started doing it originally with women, but eventually with everyone. And I started relating this way with everyone I encountered. And I noticed the quality of interactions that I was having changed over time. I noticed that I would go deeper with people. There'd be more intimacy. I'd feel more lit up. People would feel more comfortable in my presence. People would get vulnerable with me. And so that was the journey. And then I really enjoyed so much that was happening. And I felt like I was able to give a lot of curiosity to other people, and I would be able to navigate into their worlds and kind of bring them to life through that. But I rarely received the same quality of attention back. Rarely did anyone give me, and I was like feeling unseen. Like I had all these people around me who felt really seen, but I was unseen, and I was like starting to feel really uncomfortable with that imbalance. So I started teaching it. So I literally started teaching because I was like, I want more people to be curious about me, you know? And so that's what started my teaching work 10 years ago. I just started facilitating small groups in these practices. And so I've been doing that, you know, with my own learning, with my own understanding, with my own extra research, and forming it into like a more coherent, structured approach. But largely driven from that sense of like, I want more playmates in, and so one last piece I want to leave there is of kind of why I'm so keen about this is, and maybe we can go into this if you like, is the intersubjective space or the interpersonal space, the space between us. It's like a whole vast universe, right? The thing is, I can't go there alone. It's like I can go into my own universe on my own. I can go in through meditation, introspective practice. I can go through the use of psychedelics, but I can't go into the universe that exists between us on my own. I need other people. And particularly I need people who are skillful. So I'm like, I want to go, like that's the whole universe I want to explore. So how do I help people develop to that point of having more playmates? I also believe this is what helps evolve our consciousness to really develop in this particular domain.
You're making me very happy. I love listening to that. That's like, and I guess let me ask you this. Do you believe, because what I'm hearing in your thread is that from your pain, from your own wounding, your own perceived trauma from childhood comes this gift, is birth this need, this desire. Do you think that's true for most people, that our greatest purpose can be traced into something that wasn't quite right in our childhood?
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that you asked that, and it has me just reflect. I don't know if you're aware of gene keys as a particular framework. Doesn't matter if you aren't. In that they look at each aspect. We have a certain set of qualities that make up our structure, but that doesn't matter. The most important part is that each aspect has a shadow, a gift, and a city. Like the city is the realized state. And so what you just said to me lands of like, yeah, I think so. I think there's a shadow, which is our own pain, our own wound. There's some aspect of our own unique essence that starts off in this kind of shadowed, wounded,
Yeah.
like discomfort state. And if we stay with that long enough, if we allow that to drive us, to move us, it becomes a gift, and eventually it becomes a realized kind of state or way of being, potentially a city. Yeah.
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 For me, it was dissociating. I dissociated to get through my trauma, and was very good at creating a persona on top of that, but it really didn't lead to intimacy. So, somewhere down the road, I had it all except those kinds of relationships that you described where you're being met. And I kept going, well, what's the commonality in this picture? And it's me. So I had to really start to look at, being embodied, and that became my life teaching too, that I love to share. So that, yeah, it resonates for me. What for you is the difference between emotional intelligence and the work that you're calling the fundamentals of authentic relating?
Nice. So I just wanted to actually just acknowledge, like, I almost wanted to like dive in and explore in what you just shared as well, but we'll just
You
stay
can
with
do
this.
whatever you
Like,
want, Damien. You really can.
yeah, like I got curious then when you shared that your pain was dissociation, and so it's moved you, like you're starting to feel like your gift is embodiment, the practice of moving into
Oh,
the
it became
body.
my life purpose to teach
Your life
others.
purpose.
I had to do it myself, which was
Yeah,
horrific. I remember because I was living in my head. I'm smart that way.
yeah,
Like I can
yeah,
weave patterns and talk and blah, blah, blah. But I had a she-wolf for a teacher who cut my head off in the middle of a workshop, and it went rolling into the center of the room, and she wouldn't let me speak. Like wouldn't let me speak. And I got so mad. I'd never been angry like that because I just didn't. I mean, I got embodied pretty damn quick without my mouth and without the ability to, do what I did well, but still to prevent feeling. I wasn't really in vulnerable feelings until my head got cut off. And that was the beginning for me. So then, yes, that became my offering. And when you were sharing at the beginning about, yes, so that's great, Tasha, you're living in your body, and isn't it awesome that you're helping people? But the longing that you talk about is still my current reality. And it's got nothing to do with COVID. It's got to do with, I'm really trying to dissect whether what else I can do so that I can be met, as opposed to go, well, wait a minute. There are some basic tools that if you don't have those, and that's where we're going to get to in this interview, you don't get to move into the space you were talking about between people, which is the excitement because it's unknown. I don't want to know everything. I want to not know and then be surprised. That would be pretty awesome. Anyway, that's enough about
beautiful.
me.
Oh no, I love it. What you're speaking to there is novelty. That's what I call novelty. I love novelty, or emergence is another
Yeah.
way of framing it. Of when the unknown emerges, it's like, wow, yeah, like
And the
I never
alchemy,
discovered that.
because you got two unknowns, mine, yours, Mark's, three actually. And so, yeah, when that emerges, it's like something new is birthed that actually couldn't have existed unless we all stepped up and got vulnerable, real, authentic. I love that feeling too.
Mhm.
Okay, so emotional intelligence versus the fundamentals of authentic relating.
So we can narrow that down to something that I've been calling relational intelligence. So we have emotional intelligence and we have relational intelligence. And what you just said before of like, unless we have these basic tools, we can't go there. Well, we kind of can. Like the space between us exists all the time. It's present. Yet those moments where there's like that beautiful emergent, like, whoa, I'm so in something with you. They happen kind of randomly. They happen. Sometimes the conditions are right, and we have that experience. Unless we start understanding kind of the rules of engagement of how to enter that space. How do I actually become an active participant in engaging that? Just like with my own process, once I learn to meditate, then I can actually start exploring my inner world. But I have to learn some structures of meditation in order to do that. Otherwise, it just might randomly happen. I might be walking in the bush and suddenly I'm in a state of awe or something. But if for those who have like seasoned practice meditation, you do it long enough, you actually start to have a consistent, predictable engagement with your own inner reality. The same happens in our intersubjective field. When we know kind of how to create the conditions to enter this space consciously, we can have a predictable engagement with that space. Now, what we find in there is novel, is emergent, is these mysteries, like you said, combining together and emerging into something entirely novel, entirely new, and which is what we want. That's like, in some ways we're here to discover new, rather than just like stay with what we already know. So emotional intelligence to me is essentially the ability to hold my own emotions and not be dysregulated by them, to be able to be capable and nuanced with observing, having distinction, defining, being able to articulate my own emotional experience. So I'm able to hold my emotional reality in a certain way. That's what emotional intelligence is. And it's important if we want to relate with others, yet it doesn't engage the fact of relational intelligence. And so relational intelligence is, how do I navigate in relation to you? How do I weave a shared reality with you? How do I express myself in a way that you can experience and understand and receive me? And how do I listen in a way that receives you, in a way that I can actually understand, experience, and receive you? And from that, what happens? And so relational intelligence is, the fundamentals of authentic relating is this course where I break it down into nine skill sets, nine kind of tools. There's more, but these are kind of the fundamentals that I think of. And when we understand these, now I have facility around how I relate. I now have choice. Every time you speak, I have like a scrolling list of the choices that I'm going to make in relation to you and how that's going to influence and change the direction of the relating that we're in. And so it may seem like there's a forcing around it, but actually it's creating more options, creating more diversity, and it's creating more opportunity to connect.
I think it's important to address this regulating of the emotional of the system, because you could have all the knowledge in the world and the best intention in the world. When you're triggered, something sweeping over you, it's tsunami time, and I think you can get better at it, but I wonder if you could offer, because that's the starting point here. You can't make any of those other 9 choices or have that scroll if you're being blasted by a feeling. I'd love to pick that apart a little bit. Let me start there, and then I have a second question to add to it.
Sure. So, yeah, when we become emotionally dysregulated, the blood and the energy pulls away from our prefrontal cortex to kind of the more primitive parts of our brain, and we go into some form of fight, flight, or freeze. That's just a survival instinct that happens. And as a result, our creativity, our intelligence, and our social engagement functions all start shutting down. They start shutting down by degrees. The more triggered we are, the less access we have to these. So you're absolutely correct. Like, doesn't matter the relating skills or tools that I have. If I'm in a highly triggered state, forget about it. I have very little access to them. I mean, can get better at it. Like, I can hold myself in a trigger more and more now and still know that, like, I'm having thoughts screaming in my head about this person. I've gone into criticism, gone into judgment. I want to shut down and get away from them. And even though that's happening, there's another part of me that can recognize that this is not true right now. This is actually not how I feel. I'm in a triggered state. And I can, it's hard work. I can stretch and do something a little bit different. So that's part of what happens as we develop both our emotional intelligence and our relational intelligence.
Right. And
but what we can do,
go ahead.
I want to share one more piece there.
Yeah.
What we can do is, if I start to learn relational intelligence and I start to learn different ways of relating and really understanding and holding and validating and seeing another person, I can be with someone else in their trigger and I can quite rapidly bring them out of it. There is consistent patterning around how to come back into a co-regulated state. And if I know that, if I understand those patterns and I'm not triggered, you're triggered and I'm not triggered, I can help you come into a regulated state very, very quickly. It doesn't take that long at all.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, for me, one of the quickest ways to lower that degree of emotionality is when I land in the meaning I'm making of whatever it is I'm perceiving. So I'm always starting with, if I have a big, huge emotional reaction, 99.9% of the time, I will be incorrect about the meaning I'm perceiving. People do and say things and we immediately make it mean something. I wonder if you could touch on the correlation between thought and feeling, and if that's an essential piece in your understanding of bringing to the table, because without it, I'm not, like, I think my most difficult struggle is if the other person insists on something about me. and I'm checking in. It's not true. It's not what I'm up to at all. I'm willing to leave no stone unturned to tell you what I'm up to, but it's not that choice that you just made. That's your mom or whatever it is. So I wonder if you can touch on the correlation between thought and feeling, and also whose responsibility is it in that situation?
Mm, mm. Wow, there's so many things in there. There's three things I want to address in there. Maybe I'll go backwards. Um, whose responsibility is it? So I would say I answer that in two different ways. It's the responsibility of the least triggered person. That gets complicated. Oh, but I'm more triggered than, no, forget about that. Just
Yeah.
like that's not being responsible if you want to engage that kind of behavior. And it's the responsibility of the most mature person. The person who has developed the most capacity is in a state of more responsibility. The Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility. If you are doing your own work and you develop yourself, you become more responsible to hold the people who haven't. Now, you get choice around this. I can choose how close to my inner circle I want. I don't want to romantically date someone in which that I'm having to be responsible for their emotional state all the time. I want to be with an equal, with a peer. So that's my personal choice there. But there is a responsibility there of whoever has the greatest capacity in that moment is the more responsible one. Now, don't let that feed the victim. The victim that goes, oh, but I have less capacity than you right now, so you need to be responsible. Like, we're not going to do that. So
Yeah.
hopefully no one takes it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's all about intention. Clearly, if harmony is the end result, we can't be playing any of the games that people get into, right?
do I want to be a victim or do I want to have intimacy?
Right. I've often said it's Course in Miracles. Do I want to be in love or do I want to be right? Same thing. They don't
Exactly.
exist in the same. Yeah. So can you touch on thought, meaning, and feeling?
Yep. Definitely getting there. So in the work that I do in this course, Fundamentals of Authentic Relating, the starting point is to differentiate between four domains of experience. There's more, but there's four major domains of experience that we cover. So we start with the somatic, or the feeling, sensory feeling in the body. We have the emotional domain, we have the thought or meaning-making domain, and then we have the sovereign domain of the soul. And so those four domains are arising all the time. They're here all the time. So if I'm in a triggered state, I'm going to be having a somatic experience in my body. Maybe my heart's starting to race really fast. My throat feels contracted. I'm having an emotional response in which maybe I'm feeling scared. I'm starting to feel scared and overwhelmed. And then more complex feelings might emerge of like, I'm feeling a lack of trust in you. I'm feeling like you might hurt me. These are feelings that start to include meaning making, right? They're not pure emotions, but they're still in that sort of feeling domain. And then I have my meaning making, which is, you're not a safe person, you're not a trustworthy person. And then I'm going to start going through the list of flaws and all the things that you've done in the past that is going to validate the way that I'm feeling right now. And so we're having all of these domains arising in the moment, and we don't have access to our sovereign domain when we're in that state. It's like that goes offline. So how we work with that, and I don't think you fully asked that, but how we work with that, and I draw this from a meditation teacher, a spiritual teacher, Shinzen Young, in his book, The Science of Enlightenment. He articulates about differentiating between the different streams of input. So if I can differentiate between my somatic experience, between my emotional experience, and between my cognitive or meaning-making experience, if I can actually separate them, what happens is I reduce the impact on my experience. They're now additive. I'm having this sensory experience and this emotional experience and this cognitive experience, rather than if I don't differentiate, they're multiplicative. They kind of feed each other and they exacerbate each other. So I can separate those, and that starts to give me more space in coming into regulation. Now, if we bring this into a relational field, I can help you do that. If you're in a dysregulated state, I can ask you, what are you noticing in your body right now? Immediately, you're going to start becoming more present. You're going to go, oh, like my throat's feeling really constricted and I'm feeling contracted. I want to run away. Yeah, okay, you want to run away. I'm going to be with you in that sensory experience. And I'm like, what's the feelings arising? And by the time we start going up to meaning making, what's the meaning making you? What thoughts? This is a beautiful way to end a conflict with someone. If I'm in a regulated state and someone's having a trigger about me and they're feeling uncomfortable and I'm feeling well boundaried, and boundaries to me doesn't mean there's a wall. It means that I'm able to filter what's coming through. So I'm able to keep out any charge and just hear the hurting person in front of me right now. I'm able to, oh, this person is hurting, and I can disregard the other things. They're not going to affect me. And I can ask, what's the story you're making up about me right now? You want to discharge tension? Ask someone that and not get reactive to it. What are you telling yourself about me? And then maybe like, that you're not a trustworthy human. Be like, I'm going to validate that. Like, oh yeah, I can see how I'm not being trustworthy to you right now.
It's interesting listening to you. I love that. I haven't tried it. What's the story you're making up about me? But the first part about what you're feeling and being in the body, I've been accused of it being therapeutic. I'm also a psychotherapist, right? So as soon as I start what I call holding space for that other person, they have an experience of separation, because it is a different therapeutic dynamic is completely different than a relational one. It is a relation, but you know what I'm saying, right? It's different. And so a question like, what's the story you're making up about me is, again, they can either go with it or not, but I'm not leading it anywhere. And I guess the other thing I notice is whatever that story is about me, the more important question is, when did you first feel that? Which is very therapeutic, but that's the truth. Something in that person's past or my past, except I'm in touch with it because it's a habit I've created to tag it on to any reactivity. I'm always going, oh, what's the root cause? Because I know it's not the person in front of me. It never is. It's this feeling that I'm tracking into my past going, okay, yeah, right. I'm making it mean that whatever it is. And just by saying it and knowing it, as you mentioned, everything lowers inside me. But one is sort of supporting someone to do that. When I listen to the way you do it, I'm not so sure it wouldn't result in them feeling therapized. What do you think?
So this is and I went through my own personal challenges with that for a long time, with people feeling like I was therapizing them, everything like that.
Yeah.
And so I know what you're talking about. It doesn't happen to me anymore. And I would say because the work that I teach is essentially counseling skills applied to relating. And the distinct difference is that there's a few distinct differences. The first is it's not a unilateral engagement. So we're in a bilateral engagement. We're relating to each other. So that's important. I'm not separate. I'm holding space for them. I'm in with them. So that's the first part. And then the second part is the intention. So the intention in therapy, excuse me, the intention in therapy is to help someone, support someone into resolving issues or becoming more of who they are or overcoming challenges. There's some intention that I'm helping them through something like that. The focus here is intimacy. The only reason that I'm asking you about your experience right now is to be more connected to you. It's not to fix you. It's not to figure you out. It's not to help you sort this out. It's because right now we're in a state of disconnection, and my attention in this way will help us come back into connection. That's where I'm coming from. So I'm included in that. I may also say, I may share my own experience. When someone's really triggered, I usually take myself out of the picture. They don't need to hear my experience until they're regulated. But I'm included. I'm here with them, and we're moving towards connection versus them over there, me over here. The other piece where things change a little bit for me, I understand, and I totally agree with you that generally the triggers have roots early in childhood. They have a long-standing pattern, and we can look at them and we can understand them. Yet for me, when they are emerging in this given moment, they're here right now, and my attention on them in this moment right now and creating a regulatory experience, meaning that I'm with you in a way that we're coming back into a co-regulatory state. We're coming back into the shared field of intimacy. means that your brain, your nervous system has an opportunity to rewire that pattern without us ever even talking about it.
Right.
You are in the active rewiring of that pattern just by this very experience.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start operating in this way, our interactions become naturally healing. We naturally become a healing force in our relationships. That just by the nature of who we are, and we start healing each other.
Okay, I so love it, but here I'm going to toss the next one, which is really what I first was listening to when that thread of yours came across on Facebook for me. What you just said is so true. If the moment that you're having this is different than it was in the past. So I want to bring to the table those who are avoidant and just go, okay, shutting this down. And they can do it in the most spiritual, loving way, but they're leaving the party. They're leaving the table. And to a person who's feeling whatever they're feeling, that could be a complete reenactment. Or conversely, if you're the person who, which I used to be, the one who kept talking, who would not leave it, but try to go, in my mind, I'm thinking we can work this out. We can, like, I'm hanging in there. I'm a very sort of loyal type. Like, I'll dive into the darkness. I'll go wherever because I believe whatever, but I'm not being quiet. I'm talking. And that person is like freaking out because they're overwhelmed and it feels like an onslaught. And whether it's tonal or getting passionate, whatever it is, it has the exact opposite result of my intention. So it repels. Now, that dynamic is not healing if it's acted out. It is a reenactment. So I wonder if you could support listeners, because I'm sure there are heads out there nodding, going, yeah, I've been there. What can you do in that moment? You're both triggered. Your MO will actually not work. You've done it many a time. You know this doesn't work. How would you handle that, or what tips do you have that could support in that moment of two people who are engaged that way?
If you're both triggered, it's really, really hard. Just like, let's just be clear that this is not easy work. You can get very good at it and you can hold high levels of charge and navigate them gracefully. You know, the more nuanced, the more you do this work, the more sophisticated you can become and the more spontaneous, you know, like the ways that I handle triggers with a partner, for example, is it's all emergent. I don't know what I'm doing half the time and we're just coming into these states. But what we want to realize, if we're both triggered, anything, like any trying to resolve it or figure it out is not going to work. There's no point continuing to do anything that we're doing when we're triggered. It's pointless. It's only going to create more rupture. So we need to stop everything. And ideally, and this is going to be so hard at first, come back into physical contact if we can with the person. So just put your hand on each other. Or a really good one I like is come and sit shoulder to shoulder. So your shoulders are touching each other and you're both looking the same way. And just sit next to each other and don't say anything until you'll feel immediately, like you don't even need to be triggered. If you sit shoulder to shoulder, you'll find your nervous system will start coming into this interesting, calm rhythm. Or back to back if you need to. If you have the time and space, you can actually, and you feel okay with it, you can actually hold each other like in a lying embrace with no agenda. There's no stroking, there's no touch. You're not moving towards sexual intimacy. There's just a holding until your nervous system starts to regulate. So this is probably the best way until someone learns a lot more relating tools. You may not be able to figure it out, but don't try and figure it out until you're calm, you know, and definitely don't go, you know, a lot of dynamics, you're like, we need to have a break, and you go and leave the room. The avoidant needs to go and they shut down and they go and they auto-regulate. And so they're fine. They can auto-regulate, which is a form of numbing or dissociation. And then the anxious person is in absolute chaos because they actually need the other person. So we're in this state that's never going to start to generate a form of abiding intimacy. Eventually, these kind of experiences will erode a relationship and it won't be able to sustain itself anymore. So we need to stop everything. We need to come into regulation. That's the primary easy thing I would give to people.
Imagine if that was taught in school. Like
Totally.
imagine a whole pile of kids in kindergarten, and when they get riled up, they come and sit shoulder to shoulder and breathe, like
Yeah. Yeah.
as a habit. Wow,
Hmm.
like it would be so, I've often lamented, why is this not being taught in school? It's like the most, I mean, we could almost shift globally, although I want to get into the specifics of what you teach, but globally right now, there's so much
Hmm.
reactivity. This whole
Hmm.
conversation that we're having can be translated to what needs to happen in the world. Do you believe that by getting um, comfortable and masterful at this kind of relating that is a way to change the world?
Absolutely. Um, we are social creatures. That is wired into our nervous system. We function in social groups. That is our evolutionary history, where we have come from. So we are designed to be in intimate relating with groups of other humans. That's just the nature of how we are. And we actually achieve our most optimal levels, and even if we go down to the hormonal and neurotransmitter level, our most optimal functioning at the hormonal level and neurotransmitter level of our immune system happens when we're in co-regulatory states with other humans, which doesn't necessarily mean touching. It just means that we're in the field of intimacy with other humans. And intimacy not meaning sexual or romantic just means that sense of being connected with other. So I don't actually believe that any human on the planet can thrive, truly thrive, not just survive, thrive and become the fullest expression of who they are without understanding how to relate better to other humans. Like it's essential.
Yeah. So cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I know we have to take a quick break on radio. We're actually not going to stop, but they don't let us play music on Facebook because of copyright or whatever. But just because I know we're going to end up running out of time, I'd love it if we could break down the fundamentals of authentic relating in terms of the three movements. So that's listening, expressing, and attuning. Can we kind of go through those three for our listeners? So listening,
Sure.
what are the steps that it takes to be a good listener?
So listening, so these three movements, listening is a you to I relationship. So you are moving towards I. So that's the relationship that we have to understand in, that I'm taking you in. That's what I'm doing as a listener. I'm experiencing you. Yeah. So I need to become really good at experiencing you. So in the course that I teach three listening skills. The first is embodied listening. And so embodied listening is a way of listening through those four domains I articulated earlier. How I listen through the sensory experience of my body, how I listen to the emotions, the emotional tone that I feel with you, how I listen to the meaning making that you're making and that I'm making up about you, and how I listen to your soul in a way. How do I, when I come into that space, it's like I recognize that there is some unique essence of you that is being birthed into this reality in every single moment. And it's how can I witness that? How can I be in a way that actually calls more of that out of you? You
Mhm.
know, and when we can start doing that, we become very elegant in our listening. Then we move into reflective listening. Reflective listening is a way of me validating you, a way of me letting you know that I'm hearing you. So there's very basic reflective listening where I might mirror back to you what you've said, or I might paraphrase and give it back to you. But reflective listening goes a lot deeper than that. So I'm not going to go into it now. Um, but for me, becoming really good at reflective listening is it's like having a Jedi skill, like Star Wars Jedi skill. It is becoming good at reflective listening is to be able to start helping people transform in my presence. I am able to transform the nature of someone's own perspective on themselves just by being with them, by reflecting them back to themselves. You grow rapidly with that. So
Mhm.
it's an incredible skill. Um,
Can I just ask it, because for me, the piece that seems to be the hardest when I coach people with reflective listening is empathy. Because, and that to me strikes me as the most healing aspect because it's what we didn't have as kids. We got corrected or misunderstood or even understood, but you didn't feel like someone was in your shoes. And it's not an easy thing to do. It's not being correct about the experience. It's watching another human being stretching to feel you that I think is so healing. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So for me, reflective listening has to come from an orientation of care. I
Yeah.
have to come from a place where the reason I'm reflecting you is, again, with all the intention, is to have more intimacy with you. That's the reason. And then I'm from that place, I am always willing to be wrong in my reflections. You are the authority on your own experience. I don't know what your experience is. I may have insight, and any insight I ever offer, and as we go into more elaborate and skillful forms of reflection, they start to look a little bit like projections. They start to have a lot of my own
Mm-hmm.
interpretation of your experience added to them, which is where it gets tricky. It can be a beautiful gift because it allows you to see parts of yourself that you've never seen before through my eyes. But it also can be dangerous because I might be asserting something onto you that's not true for you. So I offer my reflections with so much tentativeness and so much willingness to be wrong and so much understanding that you are the authority in your experience and you will tell me if it doesn't fit for you.
Exactly.
And the beautiful thing is when I hold that and I get it wrong, we still go deeper anyway, because you'll go, well, it's not quite like that. It's more like
Exactly.
this.
Yeah.
And I'll be like, oh, yeah, I get it now. I
Yeah.
missed that.
Yeah. And that other person, the one who's going, no, not quite like that. I often see people trying to settle for crumbs. Yeah, kind of. Okay. And they sort of, but no, it's so valuable that you actually say, no, not quite. Let me try it again. And so it's this, there is no, it's a win, such a beautiful win-win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Totally.
keep going. So what else?
And so then curiosity.
Yeah.
So how to become truly curious about another human. And curiosity, to me, the frame of curiosity is the recognition that you are an entirely unique, one of a kind, one of existence being in this universe. There will never be another Tasha ever like you. And you are an entire universe of which you don't even know the end of. You haven't explored the entirety of your universe. So if I orientate my curiosity from there, I realize I can explore you forever. So curiosity is endless, it's infinite. And so there's always more to discover. So that, and then there's a lot of more subtlety. That it's not just asking questions. How do we ask curiosity in a way that opens another person into more of themselves?
Right.
So that's where we're coming from.
And how do we
So
cultivate more openness in ourselves so that we can be better able to do all this? Because you have to be open and present to be able to do this.
Yeah, that's I have practices for that in the course of how we start to develop and understand and locate our own internal compass. I believe everyone has a curiosity. A lot of us had it beaten out of us as children. We have all these stupid sayings like curiosity killed the cat. Like, no, you know what? Curiosity turned the cat into a lion. Curiosity is what made the cat the king of the jungle. So curiosity is wonderful. And so often it's just about uncovering that curiosity again. We all have it. It's just uncovering our own unique curiosity. And everyone has a different flavor of curiosity, a different way of how they want to follow it.
Yeah, but making friends with questions. Like I love questions, but some people don't.
Totally.
They feel that they're being threatened somehow, or they are being questioned as if like their essence is being questioned, whereas it's a question to understand, as you said earlier. Yeah.
I believe we can get so good at questions that anyone will love our questions. I don't remember the last time I ever had somebody feel uncomfortable from a question I asked. So I believe it's really possible.
It is, eh? So I guess tone must be important because that's, I think my biggest failing is tone.
Tone, intention, embodiment, orientation, a lot of these things. So I do a lot of the work in the course. Is less about the communication tools. If we don't use any word patterns, we look at the embodiment. What is the embodiment? Where is the intention? Where am I orienting from? And then how do I channel that attention? It's just the energy of interpersonal dynamics is attention. So my listening is an attention. And if I focus my attention in one way, it becomes curiosity. If I focus my attention another way, it becomes reflective listening. But it's the same quality of attention.
As opposed to being focused on the other person and the impact? That's actually a question. Because some people do that, right? They're
so
actually, yeah.
So I actually don't really know what you mean with that question.
Meaning what you just described as a way to be a more effective listener, your focus is internal in how you're delivering the question or your state, right? as
Both.
opposed to external. So your reference point is internal, not external. I'm not doing this because I've decided that you need it delivered a certain way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So it gets really, really interesting. When I'm listening, I probably have around 70% of my attention on them, but it's observational attention. I'm watching them. That's the listening part. And 30% is on me watching for my own reaction
Right.
to them. And that's what's informing my questions. That's what's informing my reflections, is this dance between observing them and observing myself. And in those two different streams of information, and also opening the channel for my own spontaneity, my own elegance, my own brilliance, comes emergent questions, comes emergent reflection. You know, we have to open a lot of channels, and we have to clear a lot of cobwebs to really get ready. Like, it's work. We're developing a form of intelligence, right?
Right.
You can't just learn one pattern of language and then that's it, you're good. No, you have to develop
Right.
this intelligence.
Right.
So I'll run through the last little bit quickly. So we move into expressing. And so expressing, for me, the first part of expressing is vulnerability. Learning to, and in vulnerability I also relate to as embodied expressing. So it's actually learning to express myself, express from myself, which includes the sensations in my body, which includes my emotions, which includes my meaning making and my whole sovereign being. And how do I say what's actually true for me? Vulnerability is a deep topic, and we are most drawn, generally humans are most drawn to the most vulnerable people. We are most drawn to the most authentic people, the people who are most willing to express themselves regardless of how others perceive them, are the ones that are the most magnetic. You know, vulnerability is magnetic. True vulnerability. It naturally opens us up. It has us lean in. It has us want to come closer to somebody. Not always. I mean, there's exceptions to every rule, but generally, authentic vulnerability has a magnetic quality. It has a quality of initiating intimacy.
Unless you're allergic to emotions, and then something else can happen.
Sure. I mean, that's just some of those. There's just cobwebs that need to be cleared there. You know.
Well, isn't it also a practice? I remember reading, who was it? Dr. Murray Bowen's scale of differentiation, and he talked about one of the qualities of a highly differentiated person is the ability to tolerate both ambiguity and intense feelings in self and other. And that's something that you have to practice because, again, the wiring kicks in. Danger, danger. Oh, somebody's, losing it or whatever you perceive. And so the practice of being well with high intense states has value, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a developmental move. I don't know if you're aware of Robert Keegan's models. It's a move from socialized mind where I'm generating my identity from how others perceive me to self-authoring mind where I'm generating my identity from my own internal values and internal compass. So we're actually growing into it. So again, this is an intelligence. We're growing. We're developing. The second part of expressing is desire, orienting from desire. Desire, not necessarily, again, when we say words like desire and intimacy, people immediately think of sex. We have this weird connection to it. For me, desire is the way that my essence, my unique self wants to express and be in this world. Desire is how I be who I am. If I listen to my desire, it will form and inform who I am in the world. It will create me. It will create my purpose. It will create the relationships that I move towards. It will create the hobbies that I'm interested in. It will create the kind of life I want to live. Desire is what moves me. So we learn how to be more deeply in our desire and move from our desire. And then the third part of expressing is boundaries. And boundaries, to go back to what you just said about differentiation, to me, boundaries is what allows me to be differentiated from others. The way boundaries is taught generally is a really basic model for me. It's really incomplete. Boundaries is taught about how I say no to people and how I maintain space and, things around me. Actually, to me, boundaries foster intimacy. Boundaries allow me to be differentiated from you. And through the differentiation between you and I, we can now meet. If there's no differentiation, we can't meet. We'll be enmeshed or we'll be separate. So, and then boundaries are a filtration system. So they allow me to be with you in a way that receives you and maybe not the noise, the distortion, the static that we all carry.
Mm-hmm.
So we become elegant with our boundaries, meaning that I'm always boundaried. And anywhere, it's very easy to know a place you don't have a boundary. Anywhere you get triggered, you don't have a boundary.
Yeah.
There's no boundary there. You either have no boundary or you react to having no boundary by having a wall, which is what the avoidant tends to do. They'll tend to put up a wall. But sometimes the anxious side, like that stream of words that you're talking about, is a form of wall. It's pushing the other away in a way. It's creating a separation between us. Because there's some part of me that's unboundaried there.
Right.
And I've gone into chaos because of that. The
Right.
boundaries allow us to be regulated and differentiated and then create the conditions for intimacy.
Would you say a boundary then would be a definition of self? Here's where
Yep.
I stop. This is it. And there's where
That's right.
you start over there. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Beautiful.
Okay. Attuning, because we only have a couple of minutes. And that's the one that I'm going, tell me what you mean by that.
So tuning is when we start. So listening is you to I relationship. Expressing is I to you relationship. I'm expressing to you. And attuning is we. When we start moving into the shared space between us, how do we actually move into the we space? The thing that is you and I together. And so I love to leave this a little bit more ambiguous, a little bit more vague, because I only start touching on it at the end of my course, because you can't have any real conscious volition around this space without developing all these other skills I spoke of first. They're essential. We have to get really good at relating you to I to you. Then we can start consciously co-creating the we space. And this is where we move into intersubjective practices like circling, where we're actually navigating the space between us. But there are ways we can start dropping into that. One is I can notice you. I can notice, I could pause here and start to notice. And if we had more time, I'd probably drop into it. Notice the shape of your hair and the waves of your hair and the color of it. I can start to bring attention to that, which immediately, even though I only did a little bit, you can almost feel we're almost a little bit more present in the moment. The moment I say that, the way that you're looking at me right now, you seem to be really absorbing what I'm saying. So I'm starting to speak what I'm noticing. Then I may also share impact. So I may say, being with you, I feel, I notice that I'm feeling like, I feel kind of really open. Like I can feel that you're really interested and engaged, like I just mentioned in what I say. And it has me want to talk a lot. Like I want to share everything. Like I have this sense with you that I want to share everything that's going on for me. So I'm now letting you know the way that you're impacting me. So we're now starting to be in a circuit of connection between us, which is facilitating us to move into this space between us. And then we'll move into resonance, which is where we might actually, both of us, actively start exploring, what is this space between us? Who are we? When you and I are together, what is this relationship that we're in? How would we describe it? And then we're actually consciously co-constructing a we space. Yeah. And then we can do this.
Can that exist without agreement? Can we have different perceptions of what is
Absolutely.
occurring? Right. And
Absolutely.
that is a beautiful thing that is so difficult to get across to people. We don't have to agree to be close at all. And I know people say that we agree to disagree, but this is so much more, because you're talking about literally, it's not just to move on, let's agree to disagree. It's you're talking about being with those two different realities at the same time. And it's okay. There's room for both and more than two.
And even more than that, as we again start to develop more, the potential is that if we really are with our difference and we really leave the space for it and we actually start exploring, we will find an emergent possibility. We will find something that is beyond either of us.
Right.
And that's when it gets really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So listen, we have 2 minutes or so left, maybe less. Tell our listeners how they can find out more about you so they can keep in touch and the work that you're offering. Where's the best place to go?
I'm my website is evolutionaryrelating.org. It's all one word, evolutionary relating. And that's about to be overhauled. It's being put to a new server, and there's an online self-paced course coming out in March around the fundamentals of authentic relating, which will have a community in it. We'll have classes. I'm really excited. This is going to be, I feel like this is the start of the work that I want to offer. So I'm actually starting to train new facilitators to teach this. I really want to grow this. Then people can follow me on Facebook, Damien Bohler on Facebook, or Instagram, Evolutionary_Relating. And I just post my writings and musings there for now until I move to the new platform and I start creating community there. And I'm going to start disappearing from conventional social media and put more attention there.
And just spell your last name for those listeners who will be listening, tuning in on radio.
Yeah, so it's Damien with an E, Damien, and Bohler, Bohler.
And last thing, from your heart to the world, what's your message? What's your gift? What's your wish?
That's a good question. I like there's a lot. Love is what heals us, and love is what grows us, and love is what transforms us. And love is an active participation. Like it's a way of being. And yeah, there's a lot more that I could say, but I think I'll stay there.
Well, thank you. It's been really a pleasure. I'm so glad I trusted my intuition and went, yes, let's do this. And hopefully stay in touch, because if you do have some offerings, we'd love to. I know you work a lot with the masculine, feminine, and I love that road. So when you've got offerings in that, come back. We'll do another interview.
That's great. Thanks a lot,
Okay.
Tasha.
Thanks. We've been speaking with Damien Bohler, facilitator of interpersonal dynamics, called The Fundamentals of Authentic Relating. And that's it for Conscious Living Radio. Thanks for joining.